Fantastic. Okay, for those of you who don't know me, my name is David Lyon. I actually have recently left Cancer Research UK, so I apologise if you hear as I talk, me talking about sometimes the past and sometimes about the present. It's literally to do with the fact that I'm highly passionate about what cancer research does and the future that they can bring, not just to their particular goal, but frankly to all of us. So I apologise if I do talk in two different tenses. Today what I'm going to talk to you about is my experience at Cancer Research UK, what I did, how we went through it. And it's a really difficult session to follow Christian because he's incredibly passionate talking about the future. What I'm primarily going to talk to you about today is what I went through at Cancer Research UK and how I think we made a difference to what we do as a cause. A little bit of background to me. I joined Cancer Research UK about 4 years ago. I'd come in from Novartis, based over in Basel, where I was looking at a large range of corporate spend categories. And cancer research for me was really my first CPO role, my first head of procurement role. And I came in with a mission to change procurement from being a tactical, transactional type function to being something that was much more innovative, category management focused, and really looking at the future. So the big question is, how on earth can procurement, and procurement technology in particular, help cure cancer sooner? That's a bit of a big ask, but I've got this vision. And this vision is that at some point the procurement team from Cancer Research UK will be walking down the street and people will start clapping. Because these are the guys that enabled the scientists, that enabled the researchers and enabled the fundraisers to raise the funds to deliver the solution that cures cancer for once and all. And this is an amazing mission. This is about the only organisation I've worked at where, frankly, the whole organisation is lined up like a die behind the cause. Usually in an organisation, you've got people saying, well, you know, it's for the shareholders, or it's my particular department, or this is what I'm trying to achieve. No, Cancer Research UK, bang down the line. That's what we're there to do. And that's my vision. Well, I joined them. And it wasn't like that in procurement. This was almost the impression. I've got two different versions of this slide. I've got one where the telephone is broken. The communication networks between procurement and the business were fundamentally fractured. But this is the other one that I use, which is essentially, we're a department of robots, essentially, often seen to be highly mechanistic, very, very impersonal, often taking fake money and stuffing into a fake piggy bank. We're an organisation that was really around something which didn't have relevance to the business that we're there to deliver. Can you imagine that? In an organisation of people who are passionate about fundraising, people who are passionate about science, and procurement, they're talking about stuffing the piggy bank with money. Doesn't ring bells. What we did have, very positively, stunning PO compliance and stunning customer compliance to a very limited number of suppliers. So for the amount of spend that we had, instead of being an 80-20 organisation, we were a 90-10 organisation. So 90% of the spend, 90% of the spend went through 10% of the suppliers. Really narrow supply base and high procurement PO compliance above 98%. So when I talk about really enviable within a procurement world, a great starting point. But the problem is I needed to get that aligned to where we needed to be as a procurement function. And so this is the slide that I presented to the senior executive team about a month after I joined. We were on this side. We were the traffic wardens. Perceived poorly, pretty much everyone was hating what we were doing. It was minutiae detail. So one of my key category manager in charge of science is a massive spend within Cancer Research UK. She was spending half of her time answering VAT questions, and the other half of her time she was working on a flooring tender for £14,000. And you think, this is an organisation, procurement organisation, that's blocked itself off into this I'm a traffic warden type of environment. And I needed to move us, and we needed to move to this central block, because you can't go from here to here. You've got to have an intermediate step. And my step was, I wanted to be flight crew. I wanted to be someone who was organised, structured, able to deliver, but in charge. So if you think about flight crew as an analogy, they're there, they're serving. You've got the nice ladies dressed up neatly. They look like a team. They'll serve you coffee. They'll make sure that you're happy and comfortable during your flight. But if you start kicking off, they're the guys that come around with the cable ties and strap you to the seat. And when the plane starts going down, these are the people you turn to get you out in an emergency. So I think actually what we're trying to do is to say, we're no longer the traffic warden who are causing you slowness, pain, anxiety. And what we're trying to move to is a structured, well-organized and well-disciplined team who can help you get what you need. And so if I think about the whole technology piece, this was fundamental. Actually, what we needed to do was get all of those systems and processes really slick, really efficient, as the first stage to qualifying ourselves as being that middle block of a highly efficient, highly organized procurement team. We were lucky we did have a good procure-to-pay system, which was driving a lot of that PO compliance, but I couldn't get a single report out of it. It was an end-of-life product. It was coming towards the closure of the manufacturer's usage of that particular platform. And I literally could not get a single spend report out of it. So I could query. I mean, if tell me your supplier, I can type it in and come up with all the POs that have been raised, which was really useful. But if I want to find out how much we spent by department, how much we spent last month by per commodity, hopeless. And part of the problem here, and I'll come on to procurement technology, is a lot of the systems have been built up with artificial intelligence. And this is where I like artificial intelligence, but I also quite detest it. There were rules created within this software platform that were deliberately changing the coding of spend to something else. And I spent the best part of a year and a half recorrecting that false mapping. And it was really quite frustrating that every time I said, look, hang on, this spend is going to this category, but it's not supposed to be in that category. And somebody in the business said, well, yeah, but it's coded like that, and if you change that, then it doesn't change that. It was an absolute nightmare. So I was having to fight the system as well as set up new processes. And a lot of my manual processes, things like data collection, things about savings collection, was highly manual. So in order to produce my monthly spend and savings analysis, it took one of my team probably the best part of 4 days. Okay, when you've got an organization that is there on the mission that we're there to solve, and you've got a small team of 10 people, to have one of your team basically 25% on producing a single report, it's using up too much capacity. So what was very clear to us, we needed to do something. We need to do something pretty quickly. And I won't make any bones about it. We went for Bravo, because Bravo for us, at the end of a long RFP process, was able to tick all of the boxes that I particularly wanted. And if I go back to what I wanted, I needed something out of the box. So I wanted something that I could literally deploy, turn on, and it would work. And I think sometimes a lot of the problem is when you get offered these solutions, when you get offered a lot of these programs, there's a lot of twiddly bits around the side, which take a lot of configuring, a lot of interesting functionality. I think the core is critical. If you get your core right, your system works well. And I think what I liked about this was it enabled me to do savings management, so I can manage my department. It enabled me to do proper spend analytics, so I could gather all the data I needed, interpret it, and use it for category management, so I could influence my stakeholders. It allowed me to start doing supplier tracking, supplier relationship management, as well as all the e-sourcing, e-auctioning that would drive a lot of the value out of the supply base. And lastly, at the time when we went to actually RFP, I was starting to hear noises across the organization for people saying, well, we want a best-of-breed contract management system, or we want a best-of-breed e-auction system. And I was starting to notice that there was an intention here to have multiple different platforms solving the same problem. And what I really wanted to do is have one platform that would do everything that I needed straight out of the box, and most importantly, be simple enough that I could turn some of the twiddly bits off. We're a small organization, core purpose is clear, small team. I don't need that. I don't need 25 approval steps. As I grow, I might want to add them back in, but when I start off, I want it to be as simple and as user-friendly as possible, because otherwise, I'm never going to get adoption. As Paul earlier on was talking about the minimum viable product. Absolutely. That's what I really wanted out of the box. And the most important thing for me was the ability to deploy with speed. This is not a market that is stationary. If you take 3 months to implement a product, 3 years to implement a product, the technology will have moved on, and the product that you implemented will no longer be relevant. So I wanted something that I could deploy for today, and then we can move forward, we can develop as the organizations develop, or if necessary, we can swap and change. I mean, the idea is that you don't want to spend a vast amount of time trying to deploy something which may well change, or your needs may well change over time. So why did we choose Bravo? It had the basics. It allowed me as the owner of the system to self-administer. Not just me, but also my staff, so my team of category managers, and equally, the end users. So as we start deploying some of these solutions out into the business, it allowed them to administer their own tools and their own systems. So for example, in Cancer Research UK, highly developed IT sourcing function, a large part of which sat within the IT function themselves, so not directly reporting to me. And what I wanted to do is have a common system which they could deploy, they could use, and they could actually adjust as necessary for them, rather than always coming back to me. So self-administration for me was critical. But most importantly was that third point. And my whole advice to you would be, when you're looking at some of these platforms, look at the person that's going to come in and do the delivery. Look at their attitude and how they're willing and wanting to work with you. And I've got to say, Richard, when we had Lisa came in and did the presentation to us, I thought she was spectacular. I mean, she was competent, capable, and clearly knew the product well enough that she could tell us when we were getting it wrong. And I think the key thing here is that you don't necessarily want to have a supplier that tries to sell you the moon. What you want is a supplier who comes in and says, you know what, you want to try and do those things, I wouldn't do it like that. You've got to turn off those bits, stop putting in the different approval steps that are going to get in the way of you and your stakeholders. We've seen this 150 times before. Simplify, simplify, simplify. Take it back to what you need rather than the stuff that looks like it's going to be overly complex. And the interesting thing for me, it wasn't necessarily the system limitations that caused us most headache, and it certainly wasn't us that caused the most headache. The most headache came from end users who tried to overcomplicate, who wanted to put in multiple different approval steps, who said, the legal department, I apologize if there are any lawyers in the room, the legal department constantly wanted to have approval steps placed in the system. And I had to fight to take half of them out, but I had to let a few of them go. Let the legal department have their rights to say yes or no to that. Users hated it. Why do we have to go through these rounds of approval? Why are you trying to get in my process step? Why do I have to click on that button? In the end, I had to go back to the legal team and say, look, do you realize you're slowing the business down here? It's causing left-hand side traffic warden type behavior. And when they took those steps out again, suddenly the world eased up. So if I go back to that key thing, what I loved about the team at Bravo was their positive can-do attitude, particularly the people that were on our account. So much so that are you still running events for us? Yeah. They volunteered to go out and raise money on our behalf. So actually they're not just delivering a software tool, but buying in so much the concept of cancer research that they were out there fundraising for us. And frankly, to be honest, and people will kill me if I say this, they raised more money than it cost to deliver the system. which is fantastic. which I thought was fantastic. So it's about whether or not that organisation shares the same goals and aims and values as you. Some surprises along the way. Well, as with any system implementation, there are always surprises. On a positive side, I was thinking that data analysis was going to be an absolute nightmare. Seriously, I went into the whole project thinking, I'm going to have to spend hours and hours with my team, with end users, crafting, developing reports, making the whole thing work. And frankly, I was getting about 3/4 of the way through the implementation project, worrying about when we would start doing the reports analysis. And the lady in charge of actually developing the report said, I'll tell you what, let's have a meeting and I'll show you what I've got so far. And my heart sank. I thought, here we go, bucket loads of tables, stuff which is completely off target. And I sat down in that meeting, and what was presented was a pretty much out-of-the-box full analytical suite that was designed and structured in a way that I could pretty much use. I added one single report to that whole suite of data, and that was it. That was every single need of every single possible report that I could have. So that was a real positive surprise for me. On the downside, I didn't realize how much work it would take to get our legal colleagues to get their data in order. And in the end, I actually had to bring in my own resource to actually solve the data quality on behalf of the legal department, because they literally couldn't move past data inaccuracy to try and create data accuracy. I mean, stupid things like trying to create a country name, sorry, a town name from a postcode. I mean, these are simple things, but it took me hours and hours and hours to try and persuade them to actually get their data in the right structure. And in the end, I took it off them and said, I'll tell you what, we'll sort it for you, we'll populate the data. I think the other thing that was a surprise to me was how positive the team at Bravo were that we were doing things in the right way. And when I say this, it's to do with the fact that they'd seen a lot of implementations where the conversation went round and round and round and round in circles. And the feedback I constantly got from the team was, you guys at Cancer Research are making decisions. And it's not a question of 2 weeks between each decision. You had one person in charge of the project, knew what they were doing, knew what they were wanted, and when we asked for that decision, it was made the same day, got straight back to us, we made a change, and we validated it. And it was that clearness and clarity of decision-making which I think was actually, for me, a learning that I'm going to take into any new role that I go to. And lastly, the problem for us was not necessarily the tool, it's about how much time we put into deploying it. How many of you guys work on a category management basis? How many have category managers? So probably the majority. One of the difficulties I have is, although we had great reports available, my real problem was nobody actually used them. And I'd sit there and I'd say, I tell you what, coming up to annual category planning, I'd like you to go back and produce your category analysis. And of course they all did, but they went straight back to the desk and started on Word. So, well, hang on, stop guys, we've got this wonderful tool with all these wonderful reports. What are you using those reports for? Well, you know, that's fine, but I'm going to go and do my offline category analysis. And actually the interesting thing for me, and my learning was, it's not the tool, it's how you deploy the tool to your team, your own team, so that they start using it. And they were fully trained. They knew how to use it. They just hadn't got into their head why. And it really for them was a question of, well, what's the conclusion I can make from this data? And it was almost a missing part from me to say, yes, you can produce these reports, but this is how you need to use them. This is how you interpret them. And that for me was a surprise, because I thought that all the SIPS training that you go through starts teaching people about creative thinking. But I can't remember who it was earlier, was saying the skills around data analytics are few and far between. And that's absolutely the case. If you've got your average category manager, they'll dodge a report every single time. And that worries the hell out of me. But anyway, we'll get on to that. So, where did we come from? Where did we go to? Well, this is what Bravo did for us. And when I say, without a word of cheek, that actually this is a fairly major change. That monthly reporting, that one guy for 4.5 days a month producing my monthly reports, we took down to 2 hours. Essentially, Bravo will produce all the data we needed in the same format that I had done before, with a tiny amount of our own personal time. That's a massive saving in terms of percentage resources freed up in my team. Our repeatability of sourcing. No longer did we have the same RFP recreated from scratch every single time. And yet again, I love category management, but I hate some of the things we do in procurement. Yet again, there was somebody else who was earlier on talking about RFPs where we ask things like financial statements. How many of you guys have financial statements as part of your RFP process? Yeah, pretty much everyone will. It's a fairly standard thing. Procurement people just slap on in there. We would like you to submit the last 5 years of annual financial statements. I've never once seen anyone select a supplier or deselect a supplier on the basis of how much the annual turnover was of an organisation last year. We always ask it, we never use it. Complete waste of time and data. So this allowed me, as the head of procurement, to go into those sourcing templates and take out the stuff that was just there for the sake of history. Take out the stuff there which was monkey standing on the step analogy. It really was about me simplifying that process down to make it repeatable, simple, and structured so that when we go to market, the suppliers know what to respond and can stop asking or stop having to answer the silly questions. Contracts. We didn't quite get there to where I wanted to get to, but whereas we were having contracts created from scratch every single time, we started to reduce that down through usage of the system to say, look, here's the one contract template that you're going to use with some minor variations. There's still some work to do there. But the important thing for me here is that actually we didn't change the end user participation. And that, it would be lovely to say that the end users were much more engaged and much more partnering in the system. In reality, actually, it wasn't. It was the same as they were doing before. But what was happening was it was different. What they were doing was different. It was much more impactful. So let me move on. Where are we going next? Well, I've left Cancer Research UK, so I can't talk for them, and I won't put words in the new head of procurement's mouth. But let me tell you about where I was looking to go next. And that was really around starting to use the tool for really proactive supplier management. Not just alerts about when contracts were due for renewal, but starting to put in agendas for that quarterly meeting, starting to put in customer feedback on a quarterly basis or an annual basis, depending on the supplier, starting to look at this whole risk management piece, for example, in offshore manufacturing. How do we validate that we've got the right processes at the right time to make sure that the organisation is protected? Starting to bring in things like supplier innovation as a managed process. Which of the suppliers we believe have access to the right innovative tools? How are we managing those suppliers? And yet again, templatizing that. So on a quarterly basis, we'd sit down with those innovation suppliers and we'd say, look, we'd like to understand how your innovation is going. Not as an ad hoc process, but as a structured process for managing supplier innovation. And then lastly, really starting to think about contract automation so that we as a procurement function were not bogged down with lots of questions backwards and forwards about legal terms and conditions, but really saying, here's a pre-agreed, pre-negotiated set of contract clauses. We're going to use them. If assuming that there's no changes, we'll just sign and move straight on. So almost cutting down the amount of ad hoc legal requirement and making it slick, swift, and simple. And Christian was great because what he was talking about is we've got to, as procurement, take a lot of the pain out of the organisation of what we do to enable them to succeed much quicker and faster. So my whole mantra is around simplification, simplification, simplification. Whenever we can take process out, it allows us as a function to become more human. I'll give you one more analogy. And this goes back about 10 years ago when I was working for RS Components. Does everyone know RS? So big MRO supplier, big catalogue, lots of tiny little nuggety bits that come in tiny little packages. Hugely high margin, but people don't buy the product because of the cost, they buy it because of the service. And they did some customer analysis, some customer service analysis. And what they found was that the end customers loved the quality of the speed. They had no problems at all with the price. You know, if you're paying 10p for a bag of resistors that cost us less than a penny, not a problem. No problems with the cost, no problems with the speed. What they complained about is that we were too mechanistic. We had simplified and made the phone calls so simple that we were sounding like robots. Good morning, customer ABC. Please tell me your order. We'd lost that personal touch. And my hope is that as you look at these procurement systems, they will take the pain out of the processes so that we can become human again. So we can use our brains to engage with suppliers, with stakeholders, with people who are there to make decisions, but do so without the burden of that, of having to be the person that's providing data, that's providing all the additional background. So, I'm going to wrap up fairly quickly. This is one of my favourite slides. Because what I'm working for, or what I was working for at Cancer Research, was this guy. And this guy is any of you, or any of your friends, or any of your families. These are the people that raise money on behalf of the cause because they believe that there is a cure out there. And when I go to work, or when I did go to work at Cancer Research UK, this was the image that gets me out of bed in the morning. There are people out there preparing to donate their time, their energy, their efforts to raise money to find a cure for cancer. And it's my duty, as the head of procurement at Cancer Research UK, to make sure that every single pound that is raised goes as quickly as possible and as fast as possible to finding that cure. Because if I don't, that guy is the guy that I'm letting down. And it could be him, or it could be a pink tutu-frilled 45-year-old with a big bushy beard. It's the guys that are out there raising money for the cause. And those are the guys that I came to work with, and that's what motivates me to do what I do. So, Cancer Research UK, very small procurement team. I can't talk for them anymore, but if you do have any ideas or anything you can do to help them, I would really encourage you to get in contact because it is a fantastic organisation with a great cause. I do like to thank Bravo Solution for all the incredible assistance that they gave us, not just in cost, but also in terms of passion and energy in delivering our procurement solution. It does make a difference. Taking the pain out of the procurement, taking the pain out of the system and adding money back into the cure for cancer goes towards curing. So it's a thanks to them, it's a thanks to Cancer Research, and it's a thanks to you for all the support you give. Lastly, there is a case study about how we deployed and what we did. I'm sure it's available from somewhere. Please feel free to download.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, David.